"You people need to know your place." The words fell like a coin on marble. They rang twice in the VIP lobby of Metro Ridge Medical Center, first as contempt, then as accusation. They were short, precise, designed to land. Brenda Martinez, the VIP desk supervisor, said them with the flat polish of someone who had practiced indignation until it looked like policy. Her manicured fingers tapped the edge of the concierge bell. Her smile was thin. Behind her, the glass door showed a winter sky. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and lemon oil. The waiting chairs were upholstered in a neutral that read, "Calm." None of it felt calm now. Amara Johnson's coat hung open against her shoulders. Her hospital ID, white enamel with a brass clip, sat against her chest. The words, "Legal, Chief Cardiac Surgeon," printed in small, confident type. A donor parking placard dangled from her wrist, and a laminated card, the legacy donor token for Metro Ridge's research endowment, slipped out of her purse like a quiet argument. A boarding pass peeped from the folder of papers she carried. She had flown in overnight to chair a morning meeting with a community coalition and a visiting researcher. There was a note in her pocket with a time. There was a calendar invite on her phone that would paginate later into an inbox of witnesses. There was also, beneath the quiet of everything else, a 3-line summary of the hospital's access policy she had helped author. Policy 847C, VIP guest access and credential recognition. Brenda folded her lips and said it again, as if repeating a script. "This isn't for you." The security guard, Marcus Williams, who had watched the exchange with the bored posture of someone who'd been paid to be immovable, stepped forward. His badge glinted. He reached for Amara's arm, with a motion that was practiced and severe enough to be interpreted as justification. Amara didn't move away. Her hands were visible. Her jaw was still. The camera phones around the lobby recorded angles, fingers, the click of shutters the way a metronome measures time. A nursing student, her badge swinging, phone held high with a shaky thumb, began a live stream that would, within moments, become a small stadium. Sarah Mitchell, 23, voice thin with adrenaline, started narrating what she saw into an audience she didn't yet know. "Hey, okay, this is Metro Ridge VIP desk. There's a lady here, she's showing credentials. Security's grabbing her arm. Guys, are you seeing this? Can somebody help?" The live counter ticked. 12. Then 47. Then, in the lobby's echo, the numbers popped like a soft alarm. The tiny green viewer number bloomed into 3 digits. Sarah's breath made a weak sound. She leaned closer, as if proximity would tilt the event toward truth. Amara drew her other hand from her coat and slid the donor placard toward Brenda, as casually as if she were passing a business card. "Good morning," she said, voice low and clear. "I'm here for the 8:30 equity panel. I'm the chair." Brenda glanced, then glanced away. Marcus tightened his grip. "Security," he said, using his radio as proof. "She needs to step aside." The radio at his shoulder spat static, a heartbeat of white noise. Across the room, a man in scrubs, Dr. Patricia Chen, a cardiologist whom Amara knew and who had been at the hospital since before breakfast, saw the reach of Marcus's hand and moved toward them. Her shoes scuffed quietly against marble. Her face registered the same moment Amara felt, recognition, then a public correction of the error. "Marcus," Dr. Chen said, steady as an exhalation. "She's with me. Let her be." Marcus's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected that. Brenda's nostril flared. "This is the VIP desk," she said. "I am asking her to produce a guest pass." Amara did what she always did when the world insisted on explaining her to itself. She produced evidence. First the hospital ID, clipped to her blouse. Then the donor card, which gave a thin smile into the lobby's light. Then the parking placard, laminated and official, which dangled from her wrist like a neat contradiction. She laid each item on the concierge counter, arranging them so a camera could pick them up. Her hands were calm and efficient. She placed her phone on the counter and began recording, front camera on, her name and the time stamped on the screen. 00:12, the on-screen clock read. Sarah's live feed captured the image, and closed captions that none of them had activated auto-populated in jittery, imperfect English. Woman showing hospital card and security touching her. The viewer count leapt again. We can verify this at the desk, Brenda said, ignoring Dr. Chen. We need to make sure. You can verify it now, Amara said. There's a staff directory. You can call the operator. I'm supposed to be leading the panel in 20 minutes. This is a scheduled appointment. Tom Bradley, the assistant administrator, emerged from behind a pillar, phone in hand. He had been walking the floor with a folder of reports, the habitual middle manager optimism of someone who believed problems were a matter of logistics. He had seen Amara's badge. He had also seen the expressions on the faces around the desk and felt them like heat. Brenda, he said, the tone of a man balancing attention. Let's take a breath. Amara, can we verify with security? Marcus. Protocol, Marcus said, the word sharp. We have a directive. Guests without coded passes don't get VIP access without explicit clearance. Amara sat her tablet down and tapped the screen. The camera kept rolling. She opened the note she kept for public interactions, a short distillation. Name, role, appointment, policy citation. She scrolled to Policy 847C and put the screen to Brenda's face. Policy 847C, subsection B, she read aloud, keeping even tempo. Direct recognition of credential by any supervisor. Appendix A, approved credentials include hospital ID and donor credentials. This is covered. You have the authority to verify now by radio. Brenda's smile contracted. Policy 847C is for internal staff. This is a VIP area. I will call security. Sarah's viewers exploded. Comments tumbled up in a stream. Why are they doing this? She's the chief. This is ridiculous. Amara sent a brief text to a small list she kept for emergencies. Only 2 people were on it. One read, I'm being denied entry at the VIP desk. Security is involved. Policy 847C applies. Recording now. The other was a single dot of contact that would later matter. Daniel Johnson, owner, majority stakeholder, and the man who, in a way, embodied the hospital's governance. She hit send. The message left with the cool certainty of a notification firing into the world. 0048. The live counter blinked 1.2K. Marcus's hand moved again. This time he spoke into his shoulder microphone. Require backup, he said. We have a disturbance at VIP. A security code nudged through the lobby like a small, shameful comet. People stopped reading magazines. A child who had been pressed against a parent's knee less than 10 feet away stared at Amara the way children stare when a rule breaker steps into the light. Someone whispered. The conversation at the nurse's station threaded into the chorus. Dr. Chen placed a hand against the concierge counter, at a small respectful distance, and said, This is public access. She has privileges. Brenda folded her palms, heir to 1,000 interchanges that had always landed on her side. We have obligations, she said. We're protecting patients. You're protecting an assumption, Amara replied. Her voice never rose. She was not speaking to vent. She was speaking to document, to make the record line up with reality. My badge is visible. My name is in your system. I booked the coalition meeting. You're delaying access based on how I look. Ma'am, Marcus began. On how I look, she finished, eyes level. There was no plea in it. There was a ledger. Sarah panned the camera to Amara's face. Her viewers counted up with the speed of an approaching storm. 3.8K. 7.6K. People posted the stream link. Comments scrolled like leaves in a wind. A young woman in scrubs, Anna from the infusion clinic, slid forward and said, muted anger in her voice, You can't do that. She's one of our surgeons. Please step back, Brenda said, less composed now. We have to follow procedure. Marcus formally unsheathed a pair of gloves from his duty belt. They were a theatrical touch, the kind of sight meant to signal that force was considered. He reached again for Amara's sleeve. The line between contact and violence is small, and when a hand lands on an arm where a stethoscope might have hung, it carries a story. Amara's sleeve shook the slightest fraction, but her face did not break. Her phone was on the counter. She used the other hand to key the camera into a higher resolution and to start a second recording, this one saved to the cloud as an automatic backup. Evidentiary chains are fragile. She had spent years learning how to preserve one. 0:1:32. The timestamp pulsed. Sarah's voice rose, stepping into an unscripted authority. "They're touching her. Someone call the admin. This is wrong." Tom Bradley had been scrolling through messages. He tapped the screen of his phone and called the operator, the number for the CEO's assistant. That call would later appear in logs. 01:32.12. Call placed to executive assistant. On the tile across the lobby, his face was a sudden punctuation. Panic framed incompetence. "Tom, handle this," Brenda snapped. "If she's staff, she should have gone through the proper check-in." "If she's staff," Dr. Chen said, the words a small hammer, "ask yourself why you didn't check the badge before you reached for a woman. You saw the photo." Brenda's chin jutted. "I don't respond to accusations." "You do now." Amara's tone was plain. She placed her hand on the counter and flicked the tablet into video mode, jaw set. "I'm giving you 3 minutes to verify with the operator and clear me through, or I will file a formal complaint and leave an account on the public record. That complaint will include time-stamped footage, witness statements, and every exchange that happens here." She said it without flourish. She said it the way someone reciting steps in a procedure does. The lobby breathed. The murmurs became a tide. 1:54. The live viewer count went over 20K. Comments flooded with the single steady refrain, "Stand with her." Marcus's radio squawked again, this time with a request for uniformed backup. "Unit 2 en route," the dispatcher said. The tenor had shifted. What had been a routine check now had a cadence of escalation. Amara did not raise her voice. Instead, she opened a small folder and extracted a page, a printed signed letter that identified her as Director of Equity for the Metro Ridge Health Consortium. The letter bore a small embossed seal. Her signature was legible. She placed it on the counter where everyone could see it. Her hands were steady enough that the printed ink did not blur. "Policies are supposed to protect access and dignity," she said. "They're not an excuse for refusal." Brenda's smile cracked. Tom cleared his throat and said, "Let's verify with the operator. Marcus, hold position. Please do not escalate." Marcus's grip loosened by a degree. He had been taught to hold line. He had also been taught to listen to middle managers who believed in procedures and phone calls. The radio hissed again. Somewhere in the corridors, a distant elevator chimed. Amara's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, an incoming call from an unknown number. She let it roll to voicemail. Another buzz, this one a text. The content was brief and private. "Saw your text, on my way, ETA a few minutes, stay with it." The sender ID read, Johnson D. She tucked the phone away like someone hiding a small, necessary truth. She did not announce the text. She did not gloat. She kept the timing of that information a private, procedural bit of data, a variable in a larger equation. 0:02:20. The live counter rocketed past 50K. The lobby was a humming grid of witnesses. An onlooker lifted his camera and then lowered it, uncertain about what to do with the moral weight of having watched somebody be denied. An ambulance bay door banged somewhere in the back. A security officer from a different shift crossed the lobby, hesitated, then kept moving. Staff gathered discreetly. Patients craned their necks. The hospital's public relations team, summoned in whispers, had not yet materialized in visible form. There was instead a human chorus, small acts of allyship and small acts of denial that together became an audible force. Amara breathed like a person giving instructions to herself. Her face showed nothing of the surge of indignation that might have been expected. Her posture, square back, shoulders leveled, was that of someone who had been trained to withstand more than this. She had been a surgeon long enough to know that composition matters when everything else is uneven. The livestream comments unfurled, people naming what they recognized. "Cardiac surgeon," one typed. "Director of Equity," another added. "How do you deny someone access to their place of work?" The phrase, "how do you deny," hummed like a frequency machine. Tom came to the counter with his phone raised, showing the operator's contact calling. "Operator is trying to confirm," he said. "We just need to wait for the okay." Brenda's voice dropped, brittle. "If they don't answer, we don't let her in." Amara slid her badge across the counter and, with a soft motion, released the username in the clerk's ear. "Call Dr. Catherine Walsh," she said, "the CEO. She can confirm." Catherine Walsh's name landed in the air like a weight. A minute before, Catherine had been delivering a set of administrative updates in an upstairs boardroom. Catherine had the authority to cut the knot here. No one in the room had yet reached Catherine's line. Marcus straightened. "I have to do what I'm told," he said. It was a tired defense. The radio at his shoulder rasped with the voice of the dispatch again. "Back up 5 minutes out." Amara was aware of time like a surgeon is aware of a beating heart on a monitor. She pressed her hand lightly to her side, a ritual she had when she needed to remain steady. Then she pulled her phone back from her pocket and began a different kind of documentation, naming witnesses aloud and asking them to speak into Sarah's stream. "Dr. Chen, would you introduce yourself?" she asked quietly. Dr. Chen leaned in and said toward Sarah's camera, "Patricia Chen, cardiology. This is Dr. Amara Johnson. She is on staff and scheduled to lead a panel. I can verify her presence and role." "Anna, infusion clinic?" she asked. "Anna Reyes," Anna said, short and strong. "I confirm. She's on staff. Stop touching her." Small acts stacked into proof. The stream picked up each name and made it audible to strangers 3 states away. Each testimony attached like a paperclip to the pile of evidence Amara was building. 0.02:55. The timestamp blinked. Sarah's voice, now steadier, said, "We're at 3 minutes on this live. She's been asked to step away. She's showing hospital ID and donor card. This is discrimination if they refuse her." A murmur rolled through the lobby. In the back, the cafeteria went quiet. A woman in a brown coat reached up to hold her child's hand and said, "Look, this is wrong." The child blinked and looked back to the screen. Tom's phone vibrated and he checked a message. His jaw tightened. He looked at Amara. "I have Catherine's assistant on the line," he said in a lower voice. "She's trying to reach the CEO. She says Catherine is in back-to-back meetings, but she's been alerted. They say an executive can be on site in a few minutes." Amara nodded once. She did not raise the volume of her voice. She did not smile. Her posture was a calm ledger entry. She had told her staff, in training she ran, that moments of public humiliation required a disciplined response. Preserve the evidence, gather witnesses, cite policies, and if possible, bring accountability that would change the institutional behavior rather than merely punish an individual. She was not here for retribution. Marcus's hand remained near his belt, indecision like static at the edges of his movement. The radio crackled again. "Unit 5 is ETA 2 minutes, the dispatcher said. Brenda's fingers tightened around the glossy concierge pad. She mouthed something under her breath, a private rinse of annoyance. She had a stack of forms at her desk, guest logs, sign-in sheets, that could be scouted for misdemeanors. To her, a refusal was a line of defense for order. She had built an interpretation of safety that prioritized the neatness of her logbook over the dignity of an identity. Amara's second recording uploaded, the progress bar moving like a patient on a drip. Her hands, when they worked, were instruments of care and of clarity. She opened the hospital's internal reporting portal, Policy 847C was embedded there, and started a formal complaint entry. She typed with method, time, place, names, and a succinct description of events. She attached the direct link to Sarah's live feed and the file from her tablet. The entry stamped itself with a timestamp, 000259, and then a small line confirmed receipt. A number popped up, Incident ID 2026-1198. No triumphant flourish accompanied the incident number, only quiet documentation. The portal displayed an auto-response. Your report has been received. Internal review will commence. The language was businesslike and insufficient. Amara didn't expect apologies delivered by algorithm. She expected change. On Sarah's stream, A comment appeared that made the word viral feel inadequate. "This is what we talk about." Another read, "She's not alone." Someone posted a link to a community legal aid site. 100 strangers promised to send the clip to the health system's official social channels. The lobby felt small and intimate and, at the same time, like a stadium. Marcus shifted. "Do we have confirmation from the operator?" he asked. "Not yet," Brenda said. "Hold position for backup." Amara watched Marcus's face for any sign of escalation. She thought of the years she had spent in surgery, hands steady under lights, the theater of trust that forms when a team aligns behind a purpose. She thought of the times she had seen prejudice dressed in procedures, and how often the world trusted procedure more than humanity. She thought of her own role as director of equity, of the policy drafts she had argued for in meetings where she sometimes felt like the only black voice in a room full of smiling men who polished their own sympathies into memos. She thought of an argument she had with a board member last month, a woman who had said in a soft, certain tone, "We want the community to see us as safe." Amara had replied, "Safety and dignity are the same conversation." She could not, in the heat of the moment, let policy be used as a blind to justify bias. 000312. Sarah's live count hit 120K. The lobby appeared on feeds in neighborhoods, in offices, in living rooms. A journalist watching from another state messaged a producer. Tom gripped his phone. "They're trying to reach the CEO again," he said. "She's being paged." Brenda's composure thinned. She turned her head toward the outer doors as if looking for assistance, for a reinforcement that would confirm her judgment. The doors banged as someone pushed through them with the hurried, purposeful gait of a parent running late. A courier dashed through with a bundled satchel. A woman with rollers in her hair paused, phone in hand, an expression of interest. In the midst of the swarm of live commentary and the static rise of institutional processes, Amara allowed herself one internal count. 60 seconds of patience, 60 seconds to see if authority would choose accountability over a defense of the desk. She rose, and the motion was small but deliberate. She did not push or pull. She walked around the concierge counter and stood within hand's reach of Brenda. "Ms. Martinez," she said softly, "I am here to do my job. You will honor the policies you are paid to follow." Brenda's breath left her in a small, sharp sound. "I'm asking you to step aside until authorization is confirmed." "Stand by your badge," Amara said. "Stand by the verification, don't make assumptions." Amara could see in the minuscule tremor in Brenda's hand the recoil of a person whose workplace identity depended on a script of refusal. A supervisor whose sense of control had become her anchor. That anchoring often broke under pressure, but not always without damage. Shoro 328. Tom's phone flashed with an incoming notification. "Executive VIP approaching." The text contained coordinates, the circular drive, 2 minutes out. A tiny map pin winked in the corner. Tom's eyes widened. He looked at Amara, and she, without asking, understood. She did not look relieved. She did not look triumphant. The new information was simply another variable in the equation. Someone else was coming. That person held a certain authority. It would change things, perhaps immediately. But Amara had not sent the text to Daniel for spectacle. She had done it because she believed in the efficacy of prompt, formal intervention when systems failed. It was part of the long habit of building bridges into institutional power when they existed. "Who is it?" Brenda asked, voice small now. Her voice had been the clearest in the room when she wanted to exclude, but now hers was an inquiry made brittle by shock. Tom chewed the inside of his cheek. "A note just came that an executive is approaching. It says he will be here in under 2 minutes." Sarah's viewers had gone so far that small mistakes would ricochet into headlines. Someone in the comment section mistook the incoming executive for the owner's assistant. Someone else speculated wildly about board drama. The stream churned. Amara kept her mouth closed. She arranged the badge on the counter, the donor card like a curtain, the boarding pass like a small passport. She opened her tablet and again keyed into the record a short message. Timestamp 0003.36. Notification received of executive arrival. Witnesses present. Patricia Chen, Anna Reyes, Sarah Mitchell, livestream, requesting verification and respect for staff and policy. She did not want the arrival to be about power alone. Her work had taught her that power exercised personally could be as fraught as power exercised institutionally. She had seen executives use their weight to silence questions, to privatize accountability. What she wanted was the institution to acknowledge its failure, to correct it, and to commit to the kind of reform that reduced future harms. She wanted, in a simple and stubborn way, institutional repair. Outside, a motor idled at the curb. Someone in the lobby, an employee whose name tag read Facilities, looked up and walked toward the door with the purposeful stride of someone expecting important arrivals. The circular drive's gates had a sort of unremarkable dignity, a place where cars paused and people transacted small epics of arrival and departure. The motor idled. A car door closed. Footsteps crunched on a gravel path. 00344. The live stream flashed. Car at curb. Comments spooled into a knot of excitement. Is that him? Owner? The lobby's air changed the way a room changes at the first rumble of thunder before rain. It was impossible to say, in that suspense, whether the change was salvation or spectacle. Amara's fingers moved with the mechanical efficiency of someone who required proof. She did not flinch when a small group of hospital volunteers crossed the hall and parked themselves to watch. Brenda looked toward the doors the way a woman looks for an ally. Marcus's shoulders lowered a degree as if suctioned into caution. Dr. Chen's jaw was set like a hinge. Tom checked his messages again. He whispered, half to himself, "He's coming from the north lot. ETA 1 minute." Amara steadied the tablet and looked up at the cameras. She did not speak. She let the lobby's noise carry itself until the car sound grew audible through the shell of glass. Gravel crunched. A booted step paced a path. Metal clicked softly. Someone at the entrance reached for the door. In the 3 minutes she had been forced into the lobby's glare, she had accomplished several small, necessary things. Visible documentation, public witness, a formal complaint, the uploading of files to the cloud, and a trail of verification. She had not allowed fury to become the action. She had not allowed her dignity to be siphoned away for the convenience of a script that made her the problem. The doorknob turned. The lobby's gaze tilted as one. People leaned in. Sarah's camera shivered, then steadied. The live counter held its breath. Someone outside gave a short, decisive order. Metro Ridge Security, hold the door. A figure stepped into the lobby framed against the winter sun. He wore a tailored navy coat and an air of casual authority. He was not anonymous. He did not move as if needing validation. Staff in the lobby shifted subtly, recognizing an authority that belonging gave weight to. The cameras flashed as if lit by a trigger. Amara watched him cross the threshold. The first thing she noticed was his hand, steady at his side. The second thing she noticed, and the part that cleaved the room into fractions, was his face. He looked at her with an intimacy that no executive normally would at a public reception desk. For a blink, the moment rearranged itself, and an intimacy entered the air like a new language. He finished the few steps to the counter and removed his gloves. The motion was unhurried and deliberate. He spoke not first to Brenda, but to the room, his voice a measured instrument. "I need to know what's happening here." The lobby's conversation thinned. Someone's phone chimed loudly. The world in the distance leaned in. Amara held the tablet like a small, necessary artifact. She did not let herself smile. The arrival of an executive could mean intervention, or it could mean an escalation of power that further flattened dignity. "He's here," Tom said under his breath. "He's come." Amara heard each syllable like a drum. She had, on a short internal axis, to decide how much of herself to reveal. She slid the donor card closer and did not look away from the man who had just stepped into the room. He stepped closer, and in the space of a breath the lobby narrowed to the radius of his attention. His badge, white, official, a different style from the staff's, glinted at his breast. He looked at Amara, and the way he looked carried both recognition and the sudden clarity of authority. Before he could finish a sentence, Sarah's live comments surged. Is that him? The owner? Wait. The man's voice was calm, not performative. Ms. Johnson? He asked, no fanfare, only the simple inclusion of a name. The syllable landed with the warmth of someone who knew the person he addressed. Amara met his gaze. The cameras pressed in. The lobby's tick of seconds elongated. She had 3 minutes on the clock, she had said. The 3 minutes had become a measure, but time did not end in arrival. It turned into the question of what would be done with the authority present. The man who had entered the lobby carried the hospital's ownership in the soft curve of a name. His presence bent the rules of the concierge desk into new angles. People in the room drew breath as if listening for falling glass. He cleared his throat. Then, in a voice that softened the edge of the room, he said something that pulled the people's attention like a string. Take me through it. The invitation for explanation traveled across a circle and touched each witness. Amara, with her tablet still recording, with the live stream unspooling thousands of viewers, with her file of policy citations and the taste of lemon oil in her nose, stepped forward to speak. She did not ask for vindication. She did not seek spectacle. She sought simply, for the institution she loved, to align itself with the words in its own policies. Here is what happened, she said, and the lobby leaned in to hear the cataloging of a small injustice that had been magnified into a public matter. Her voice was the clear instrument of someone who had rehearsed not what to say, but how the truth must be presented. The man nodded once and listened, and for a moment it seemed like something in the institution had tilted toward accountability. But at the edge of that tilt there was another sound, a radio somewhere in the back still calling for backup, a murmured office conversation about precedent, a staff folder on the counter that had to be opened to reveal the history of how this would be handled. Amara began to speak, to list names, times, and the outline of the complaint. She spoke into the room as if filling a form with an audience. She recited the steps and spoke the policy numbers and named the witnesses. She watched the man's face as she did, measuring his reaction like a tide mark. The world outside the live stream continued to orbit its usual concerns. Deliveries, codes, a patient checking status in a private room. Inside, the lobby had become a stage where institution and person collided. Amara did not let her words stray into the private domestic place where her connection to the man was relevant. She did not hold his arrival as a personal rescue, though she had sent that text. The power of his presence, she knew, was not the same as the righting of wrong. Left unchecked, it could become spectacle. She continued, steady and precise, and the lobby watched as evidence accumulated, the badge, the donor card, the boarding pass, the signed letter, the witness statements, the live stream timestamp. Each piece of proof slid into the collective record like an anchor. The man listened and made small notes on a pad, as if committing the order of things to a ledger. At 0412, neither the policies nor the personalities had fully decided the outcome. The scale teetered between an immediate institutional correction and a reputation-managed performative apology. The difference lay in what would follow: a simple retraction and a promise, or a plan to change the structures that allowed a concierge to tell a black woman the world was not for her. Tom watched the scene with a middle manager's exhaustion. Dr. Chen watched with the steady patience of a physician whose role was to bear witness. Brenda, forced to the edge of explanation, clenched. Marcus's jaw ticked. In the lobby, a moment stretched as the man closed his notebook and looked around, then back at Amara. He steadied himself and said, measured, "We will address this immediately." The sentence landed like a small salvation. A cheer rose, hesitant, and then louder. Sarah's viewers erupted in support. Comments scrolled with gratitude and outrage. But even as the lobby filled with the sound of relief, there was another pressure point, another line to cross. How would the institution make the words mean anything? Would there be consequences? Would there be real reforms? Or would the day bow once more to convenience? Amara felt the current of relief, carefully contained. She was not relieved so much as resolved. She had not come here for applause. She had come to secure a record and to assert that dignity, once taken away, demanded repair. Someone in the crowd clapped once, then stopped, embarrassed. The live stream hummed. The lobby ticked forward. As the conversation moved from the desk toward a hushed conference in an administrative office, Amara allowed a thin, private thought that even a well-placed presence, an owner, a husband in some accounts, could be an accelerant for accountability. Yet she knew the world well enough to recognize that immediate action could be both genuine and performative. The real test would be what followed. Who was suspended? Who was interviewed? What policies were rewritten? Who would be trained? She collected herself, picked up her tablet, and logged out of the live interface. The stream would continue to hum as the executive team gathered themselves into motion. The feed scrolled on without interruption. Comments, questions, a tide of strangers bearing witness. The man in the navy coat closed his small notebook and looked up. "We'll handle this here now," he said. His words were not intended to placate. They were an instruction. He spoke with a clarity that suggested both ownership and impatience with equivocation. Staff around the desk straightened as if a chord had been struck. Tom stepped forward, voice softer than the hubbub. "Mr. Johnson, I've reached the CEO. She's been paged. Catherine's office is en route to receive a full report. Do you want us to move this to an administrative room?" Daniel Johnson, owner, majority stakeholder, and the name that had flickered on Amara's screen an hour earlier, shook his head. He kept his gaze on the ledger of items Amara had laid out. He glanced once at the live-streaming phone, then back at the woman whose badge and donor card lay like small flags on the counter. "No," he said. "We resolve it here. We make sure everyone in this space understands what happened and what we are doing about it. I want the people who were involved present. Now." A nervous silence unspooled. Marcus's jaw tightened. Brenda's manicured hands fluttered like trapped birds. The security dispatcher on Marcus's radio cut across with an update. Backup units diverted on another call. But the immediate backup Daniel sought was institutional. The risk manager, the PR lead, the head of security. Tom barked names into his phone with the efficiency of someone who had rehearsed the steps of damage control. Daniel turned to the lobby, not to perform but to claim the room as a place of consequence. He addressed the assembled witnesses with a voice that carried the authority of a boardroom and the steadiness of someone who had been taught to speak in public. "I want a factual account of what happened," he said. "I want it precise. I also want to make sure nobody pays for anything but policy. No one, staff, patient, or visitor, walks out of here diminished because of someone's assumption. We'll handle this administratively and transparently. For now, Ms. Johnson, could you walk me through it, please?" Amara looked at him and for a moment regarded the face that had been a private line on her phone and had become the public hinge of the moment. She did not look relieved. She looked purposeful. She recited succinctly the elements she had already recorded: the initial comment at the desk, the refusal to verify, the physical contact, the delay in honoring credential verification, the escalation to radio calls for backup, the witnesses who had stepped forward. Daniel nodded as she spoke and wrote the names on his pad without fanfare. He asked questions that were practical: times, names, whether the staff had offered to check the system, whether the operator had been reached. When Amara said the operator had been paged and that Tom had made calls, Daniel's pen paused for a beat. "And the policy?" he asked. "Policy 847C, was that cited?" "Yes," she replied. "It's the one that specifically covers VIP access and outlines accepted credentials. I cited subsection B. Direct recognition by any supervisor is valid. I uploaded a formal complaint to the internal portal. The interface returned incident ID 2026 1198 at UUO 0259. Daniel's eyes registered the incident number and then flicked to the live stream for a second, then back. He spoke in the same low, urgent tone he used when a board meeting strayed into nebulous territory. "Marcus, Brenda, will you both come with me to the conference room? Now!" There was a collective intake of breath. Marcus's shoulders tightened. Brenda's expression folded into a series of small defenses. They moved with the instinctive reluctance of people escorted into an accountability moment. Daniel kept a steady pace. He did not shout, he did not humiliate, but his movement reshaped the room's energy. The crowd parted enough to allow them to pass. Tom took Amara aside as the two left. "We'll start an internal review immediately," he said. "Policy says a preliminary inquiry must be documented, and staff may be placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Amara met his eyes. "I don't want spectacle," she said. "I want structural change. I want clear verification steps at the desk. I want mandatory de-escalation training and a public reporting portal that doesn't hide behind internal jargon. And I want the staff involved to be interviewed with the same rigor they thought they were exercising here." Tom nodded with a tired look. "Understood. I'll make sure that's the focus." Outside the lobby, where the glass filtered a pale sky, the live counter nudged at a new milestone. Strangers typed and shared. A local reporter pasted the link into a group chat. A producer at a regional station messaged an editor. "Can somebody get the clip? Metro Ridge, is this happening live?" Daniel returned from the conference room 15 minutes later, with a PR specialist and the head of risk. They had moved with the kind of speed that suggested Daniel had more than proximity on his side. He had authority, and the willingness to use it. "A few things are happening immediately," he said, addressing the crowd like a captain addressing a deck. 1. We will place the staff involved in this interaction on administrative leave while we investigate. 2. We will open the incident to an external review panel to ensure impartiality. 3. We will publicly post the preliminary findings within a week. 4. We will engage an independent community advisory board to help restructure our access and dignity policies. Finally, we will commit to creating a streamlined verification process at the VIP desk within 30 days. The room exhaled with relief that sounded different on different faces. Some were cautious, some openly grateful. Sarah's live stream comments flooded with praise and disbelief. "He just said independent review," someone typed. "Finally." Brenda protested in a high, thin voice. "That's premature. We were following orders. We're protecting patients." Daniel's answer to her was a cool, administrative one. Protecting patients does not include making assumptions or using force without cause. Security's role is to ensure safety, not to take identity as the basis for exclusion. We will investigate the operational directives and the training that guided this choice. Marcus's face had gone the color of someone whose world had been reduced to the immediate corners where policy and hand met. He lingered near the desk like someone considering the possibility that what he had done would be examined not as a routine act, but as a choice. Dr. Chen moved close to Amara and placed her hand on her shoulder in a gesture that was both private and public. "You did what you had to do," she said quietly. "You protected yourself and the record." Amara tipped her head. "I did the work we teach people to do. We document. We gather witnesses. We use the evidence to make institutions better." Daniel turned to the camera phones and, without asking for silence, announced, "We will not tolerate behavior that undermines dignity. I ask for patience while we follow through with our processes. My name is Daniel Johnson. I will make sure this is seen through." The words rippled outward into tweets and shared posts. Within an hour, the clip had been picked up by local news outlets. An editorial producer reached out to Tom to request an on-camera statement. The hospital's PR team drafted a short release. Daniel read it aloud and signed off. It acknowledged the incident, stated that administrative leave had been placed, and promised a thorough review. Across the stream and in the lobby, people debated the efficacy of quick actions. Some wrote performative in the comments and asked for evidence beyond words. Amara expected this. She had always told trainees that institutional promises were only as good as the mechanisms that enforce them. She asked Daniel a plain question. "Will the Community Advisory Board have voting power on policy recommendations?" she asked. Daniel considered the question, then said plainly, "Yes. If they recommend changes, those recommendations go to the board for binding vote. No suggestions will be watered down by internal optics." There was a sound like a small relief in the room. The live feed cheered in new ways, skeptical, hungry for follow-through. The next hours moved into a sequence of administrative motions. HR drafted immediate leave notices. The head of security began writing an incident report. The risk manager requested all video feeds and sign-in logs. The PR team began preparing a longer public statement. Tom compiled a list of witnesses and requested formal statements from each. Amara supplied the links to her cloud backups and the live stream archives. She told staff she would be available for interviews but wanted privacy to process before any on-camera appearance. In the following days, the incident rippled outward into formal processes. The hospital board convened an emergency session. Chairman Roberts called for an independent investigator with expertise in institutional bias to be appointed. The investigator's contract included a clause: access to all logs, the ability to interview staff and witnesses, and a deadline for a preliminary report within 7 days. Meanwhile, Amara was asked to sit for an internal debrief. The meeting was facilitated by the risk lead, PR, and Daniel, plus Catherine Walsh by video link. She was still bound by back-to-back meetings but had been carefully briefed. The discussion covered the immediate details, the timeline, the incident ID, and the desired outcomes. Legal counsel advised on language, but Amara insisted that this not be reduced to non-committal phrasing. "I want clear steps," she said. "I want training with measurable outcomes. I want an escalated verification protocol that cannot be laundered by the idea of security protocol. I want a reporting portal that's visible and simple to use. And I want the staff involved to go through restorative modules that include mediated conversation with the Community Advisory Board." Catherine, visible on a screen that made her face slightly larger than life, nodded. "We funded a number of equity initiatives this year," she said. "We need to ensure they're implemented with teeth, not sentiment. I will sponsor the initiative through the board and ensure we meet the timeline." Word of the owner's decisive public action spread. Some opined that no one should possess that much immediate sway simply because of personal relationships. Others noted the efficacy of decisive leadership. Amara felt the complicated weight of that debate. She had not wanted someone to arrive because he was her husband. She had wanted the system itself to be accountable. Yet she also recognized that when an institution is resistant, leverage can speed needed actions. Her choice had been tactical. She had used the architecture of accountability that existed to deliver the remedy, then immediately insisted that the remedy become systemic. That evening, the hospital released a more detailed statement, naming the administrative leaves and announcing the appointment of the independent investigator. The statement included a promise to publish the investigator's preliminary report and to convene a community advisory board within 2 weeks. It also announced a temporary hotline for reporting bias incidents. The social stream continued to rage in parallel. People debated the efficacy of hotlines, of leave policies, of rapid PR responses. Some accounts praised Amara's poise, others criticized the spectacle of authority. The story, like all stories in the digital age, splintered into multiple frames. Amara kept a narrow focus. She resumed her work the next morning, returning to an operating suite where a patient waited for time-sensitive care. In the scrub room, nurses and techs offered small nods. Some hugged her briefly. A card arrived at the OR desk from unknown donors. Messages of support and gratitude had begun to appear online and in person. Yet Amara avoided public displays. She went to work with the same measured purpose as she had before the confrontation, because patients required nothing less than her full capacity. Weeks moved forward like measured heartbeats. The independent investigator gathered statements and video, reviewed logs, and interviewed staff. The investigator's preliminary report, delivered within the promised week, did not make legal determinations. It focused on facts, on the chain of events, and on systemic gaps. It found that the desk lacked clear enforced procedures for verifying staff credentials beyond a line-level training sheet, that the security unit had insufficient de-escalation training, and that the incident management portal was buried in internal menus that made reporting feel opaque. Included in the preliminary report were recommendations: a streamlined verification protocol, mandatory bias and de-escalation training for all frontline staff, the formation of a permanent community advisory board with binding recommendations, an accessible and public-facing reporting portal, and a review of the VIP access policy to ensure it could not be weaponized. The board accepted the recommendations. Daniel moved quickly from promises to programs. He committed budget, staff time, and the weight of leadership for implementation. Catherine and the board voted to adopt the investigator's recommendations and to hire an external vendor to assist with training. 1 week into the process, the hospital sent out a short memo. Brenda Martinez and Marcus Williams had been placed on administrative leave pending full investigation. The memo used neutral language, temporary reassignment pending review. But the effect in the staff room was immediate. Some breathed a sigh of relief. Others felt unsettled to see peers sidelined. The hospital committed to corroborative interviews and to ensuring the staff received an offer of restorative training if the investigation suggested appropriate remediation. Amara insisted the institution not reduce the moment to personnel actions alone. She pushed for policy writing sessions that included voices from the community, representatives from local advocacy groups, a retired civil rights attorney, and frontline nurses who often saw the worst and best of institutional behavior. She chaired the first meeting herself because she wanted to model the kind of leadership that channels pain into reform instead of revenge. "We have to make it harder for this to recur," she told the room. "That means transparent processes, clear signage at access points listing acceptable credentials, a designated escalation path that does not default to physical intervention, and ongoing training that is assessed with real metrics." The group formulated a 5-point plan, each item rendered in short, enforceable language. The plan included a redesign of the VIP desk protocol with color-coded badges and a secondary verification app that allowed supervisors to confirm credentials through a secure channel. It included monthly implicit bias workshops with external facilitators and an anonymous reporting system that publicly listed incidents and the status of investigations. It included the creation of a community advisory board with the power to recommend policy changes that the board must vote on. When the plan was presented to the board, Roberts leaned forward and asked the pragmatic question, "How will we measure success?" "We'll measure both process and outcome," Amara replied. "Process means percentages of staff trained within 90 days, response times to verification calls, and completion rates of restorative interventions. Outcome means reductions in reported bias incidents and improved community trust scores on patient experience surveys. We should publish the metrics quarterly." Daniel requested that the first quarterly update be made public. He insisted on an external audit. The board agreed. The first update 3 months later would include numbers, staff trained, incidents logged, pending cases, and a narrative on actions taken. The launch of the new portal and verification system came with signage and staff training days. The VIP desk was reconfigured with a discrete camera positioned to record interactions in high definition for safety and clarity. The security unit completed de-escalation modules and role-play sessions that emphasized identity recognition and nonviolent communication. The Community Advisory Board convened for the first time and recommended that certain phrases be prohibited in interactions, language that reduced someone's presence to a stereotype of belonging. The day the portal went live, Amara stood in a small room with Dr. Chen and Sarah, watching a screen as the system displayed the new incident tracker. The first entries were test reports submitted during training exercises. The portal's interface was deliberately simple: time, place, description, attachments, and status. The status field was public. Under review. Action taken. Closed. There was a new sense of daylight on what had been shadowed. "You did this right," Dr. Chen said. "You turned a moment where dignity was taken from you into a system that protects others." Amara looked at the screen and let herself feel the truth of that statement without letting it expand into self-congratulation. "We made a beginning," she said. "Now we have to sustain it." The months that followed were not clean. Some staff reacted against the new processes, feeling watched or constrained. There were conversations about fairness and due process. The advisory board mediated sessions where staff could voice their frustrations and be heard. Some employees completed restorative programs and returned to work with new skills and humility. Others were terminated where investigations found egregious misconduct. All decisions were described as administrative outcomes, not legal verdicts. Public opinion shifted in small waves. The initial virality gave way to more substantive reportage. A longer-form piece in a regional magazine explored Metro Ridge's reforms and featured interviews with community members who said they felt heard. Sarah, whose live stream had been the first witness, received a small scholarship from an alumni fundraiser to continue nursing school. Her footage was used in training modules to demonstrate the power of bystander intervention and the ethics of documenting wrongdoing responsibly. Amara continued her work in surgery and in equity. She began splitting her time between the OR and monthly advisory board meetings. She developed a short training module, Documentation as Defense, that taught staff how to preserve evidence without escalating confrontations, timestamps witness gathering, secure backups, and the ethics of streaming. She personally led a session on Policy 847C and the way the institution would measure compliance. There were small public moments that felt like markers of progress. A new sign at the lobby reads, "We honor dignity. If you are denied access, request to speak with a supervisor. You have the right to document this interaction." It was a modest sentence, but one that altered the tenor of many exchanges. Several months after the incident, the hospital hosted a community town hall in the auditorium. Chairs were set in concentric circles. People from the neighborhood, hospital staff, board members, and patients attended. Daniel opened the meeting with a short statement and then handed the floor to Amara. She walked to the podium without fanfare. Her remarks were careful and concise. She did not seek applause. She used the moment to explain the changes that had been made, the metrics that would be published, and the mechanisms by which the community could hold the institution accountable. "We changed procedures," she said. "We implemented training and created public reporting. But systems don't transform overnight. They require the daily practice of what we now call dignity. My expectation is that we treat this as the work of every day, not as a headline." A woman in the crowd raised her hand and told a story about being refused service years ago at a local clinic. Others nodded. Dr. Chen sat in the front row, patient and composed. Sarah, now in a scrub top with a small nursing badge, stood in the back with a friend and clapped. The town hall concluded with a small practical action. The advisory board announced that it would publish quarterly reviews of incidents and recommendations. The board asked members of the community to join subcommittees that would audit different areas of hospital policy. Amara returned to her life with a quiet concentration. There were days when fatigue pressed like a weight, and other days when she felt buoyed by small victories. A nurse who said the new system helped her feel safer in reporting inappropriate comments. A patient who thanked the staff for a respectful exchange at intake. She read the quarterly reports and sent terse emails demanding clarifications where the numbers lagged. She stayed insistent, but distant from public praise. She wanted the work to be about the institution and the community, not her. There was, in the months after, a moment that felt like a symbol of the new balance. In the VIP lobby, a small plaque was installed, unobtrusive, bronze, tasteful. It read, "This space honors the dignity of all who enter. If you experience exclusion or discrimination, please report to Metro Ridge's incident portal." The plaque included the portal's URL and a QR code. It was a small, lasting artifact of policy turned into practice. The incident did have personal reverberations. Daniel and Amara managed the private territory of their marriage with discretion. The public had seen only a sliver. Their personal relationship was not the story she wanted told. Her husband's public role had been a lever, not a rescue, one she used sparingly and strategically. She had received messages from people who resented the use of private power in public problems. She received others who said that without his arrival, the institution would have delayed action further. She understood both readings and refused to collapse the complexity into neat moral categories. At intervals, she met with the advisory board and with community members. She reviewed the incident database and asked hard questions. Which departments had recurrent complaints? Which training modules correlated with fewer incidents? Her focus was operational rather than rhetorical. She believed that dignity required operational muscle to take hold. The hospital's annual review, 6 months later, included a section on equity and access that detailed the steps taken after Incident 2026-1198. The board minutes recorded the adoption of the advisory board's recommendations and noted the metrics: initial training completion percentages, portal activity, and the number of investigations opened and resolved. The minutes also recorded the board's vote to continue funding the advisory board and to support quarterly public reporting. Someone, an editor, a journalist, a community historian, later called the evolution at Metro Ridge a case study in immediate accountability. Others argued that it was an example of how proximity to power could accelerate reform. Neither summary captured the day-to-day stubbornness that change required. Meetings, emails, awkward restorative conversations, disputes about language and policies, the quiet work of reshaping a culture. On a late afternoon, months after the lobby incident, Amara walked through the same entrance with a student she was mentoring. The sun slanted through the glass, and the new plaque caught the light. She pointed it out, and then spoke simply to the young doctor. "Records matter," she said. "Witnesses matter. Systems that honor people matter. If you remember nothing else, remember that dignity is not a luxury. It's an operational requirement." The student looked at her and nodded. "I remember," she said. At the end of the year, the hospital published the first quarterly report on equity metrics. It included the raw numbers, training completion, incidents reported, timelines for investigations, and the percentage of recommendations adopted. It was hardly perfect. Some targets were missed, but the report included a narrative and a commitment to refine processes. The advisory board published its own reflection, a candid assessment of progress and areas where the institution still needed to do better. For the people who had watched the live stream that day, the ending was not a tidy closure. Brenda and Marcus's administrative statuses had been resolved through internal processes. Marcus was reassigned and entered an intensive de-escalation program. Brenda's conduct review resulted in termination after the board found repeated incidents of discriminatory handling on prior reviews. Those outcomes were reported as administrative actions, not as criminal judgments. The investigators' final report advised further structural changes and recommended continued monitoring. Amara's posture never shifted to revenge. When Hank, the risk manager, asked if she wanted public recognition for pushing the reforms, she demurred. "I don't want that," she said. "I want the systems fixed." Her refusal was not humility for its own sake. It was discipline. She wanted the story to be about the institution's responsibilities rather than an individual's triumph. In the quiet after headlines faded and new stories took their place, the practical changes remained. The VIP desk worked differently. Verification steps were clear. Staff had new training. The portal made previously hidden things visible. Community members felt more comfortable raising concerns. The advisory board met monthly, and its recommendations carried weight. One crisp morning, a year after the incident, Amara returned to the lobby briefly between meetings. She paused by the concierge counter and watched a young nurse help an elderly visitor with a tablet, guiding him through the portal. She looked at the bronze plaque, then at the staff who moved through the space. Some new faces, some familiar. She thought of the 3 minutes that had been the pivot of public attention, and more importantly, the way those minutes had been used to create a path toward accountability. She thought of the cameras, the live stream, the incident ID stamped like a small ledger entry, and the methodical steps she had taken to ensure the event became a point of institutional learning. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Graduation next month. Thanks for showing me strength. Your training saved me from making a mess of things on my first job." Amara smiled and typed back a brief congratulation. She turned and walked toward the elevator, sleeves rolled, badge clipped, donor card tucked securely. The hospital worked because people kept working at it. Board members, staff, community advocates, and patients. Accountability had become an ongoing practice rather than a single dramatic remedy. Outside, the winter sky had given way to rain. In the lobby, someone handed a pamphlet to a visitor. A child laughed in the corner. The plaque gleamed. The portal's URL was visible on a small card at the desk. Amara stepped into the elevator and exhaled the way surgeons do between cases. Measured, steady, ready. She had not sought to be central to a story. She had used what she had, evidence, witnesses, institutional levers, to bring about repair. The owner's arrival had been decisive. The long work of keeping dignity intact would be sustained by policy, practice, and the people who insisted on both. If this story moved you, consider sharing it with someone who needs to see how documentation and collective witness can shape accountability. Tell your experience in the comments below and subscribe for more stories about dignity and systems, how evidence, patience, and principled leadership can push institutions to do better.